Good afternoon, everyone. My name is. I'd like to welcome you all to our second Getting to Grips with Your Barbecue event. It is the co-founder of the Accountancy Gourmet Academy and is presenting today live from the pavilion in Ballygarvan. Thankfully, we don't have the last week. No doubt enjoyed the session as I did mine. If you have any questions during the event, please feel free to ask in the Q&A, and Diana will pass on the questions to David as we go through. So without further delay, I will hand you over to David and we'll get started with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Hey guys, you're very welcome. This is the second lesson. So if you tuned in last week, I went over lighting up your barbecues and we discussed indirect and direct heat. So basically, just to recap, direct heat is when you cook directly over the coals or directly over the flame. So this week we're going to do indirect cooking, and I'm going to do a bit of smoking as well. So the two dishes we're going to do is going to be kind of a smoked spear chicken with kind of Caesar salad with some roasted sweet potatoes. And the second dish then is a hot smoked salmon with a dill flatbread and like a creme fraiche dressing. So I'm going to start off and get the chicken on. So the chicken takes about an hour to cook. I do have one ready, but I'm going to show you the whole process of getting it up and going. So I'm going to use the Spirit barbecue here for the chicken. So I have the two outside burners on and the inside burner switched off because I'm going to cook the chicken directly over that. So again, that's setting it up for indirect cooking. We're also going to add a bit of smoke to the chicken. So I will smoke the salmon later on the charcoal, and I'm going to smoke the chicken in the gas. So if you're going to smoke the chicken in the gas one, you use smoker box, okay? Which is basically this fella here. What I have is I've got some nice apple wood chips, which I've soaked in some cold water for about a half an hour. Close the box, and I'm going to put that over the heat there. What will happen is the wood chips will heat up and then they'll start to release smoke slowly. If the smoke is releasing too quickly, I'll move the box over where the chicken will be over the indirect heat. Okay, so that's how you're going to control the smoke. All right, so I'm just going to get that on the go. So with my chicken, you have two options really with the chicken. I'm going to show you. So for the chicken, we're going to use what's called a poultry roaster. We've got two types here, which you can get from Weber. This is the fancy one. This is the straightforward one, okay? So for this guy here, what you would do is you'd get a 330 ml can of beer, take off the top of it, sit the can in here, and you'll push your chicken down over the top. So as your chicken is roasting on the outside, that beer begins to boil and steams the chicken on the inside. So it cooks it really, really quickly and keeps it super moist. This one here is kind of a more upgraded version. I prefer to use this one because this guy here catches all the juices which you can use to make a gravy and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I have some beer which is poured in here. I've got some thyme as well which I've dropped in. And with our chicken right here, what I've done with the chicken is that I've just seasoned it with salt and pepper, and I've made thyme butter. So it's just some chopped thyme and some butter. And what I've done is I've just rubbed it into the bird like that, okay? So all you do is you get this guy here, you put it inside the cavity of the chicken, like so. And then this sits down on top of the roaster. That's it, very, very straightforward. The good thing about this guy here versus the other one is this will work in a domestic oven as well. Whereas the other one won't, because all the juice is going to drop into your domestic oven. So if you are going to buy one, I'd highly recommend this one. This for me, it's the easiest one to use. So all we're going to do now is put our chicken on indirect heat. Temperature is set at 180 to 200 degrees. Also as well with Weber, we have these temperature probes. Okay, I'm going to stick this guy here into the thickest part of the breast. So this lead then is connected to what's called the iGrill. Weber have upgraded now, it's called the Connect. But basically it's where you use your phone to cook the chicken. So I'm not going to do it now, I do it in the cookery school, is that I open up an app on my phone, I sync up to this box here via Bluetooth, I tell my phone what I'm cooking, and basically it'll tell me when it's ready. It'll go through all the steps. It'll say preheat your oven to a certain temperature. It'll tell you where to insert the probe. If you have to turn the meat, it will tell you. So it takes all the guesswork out of cooking. Also as well, with with barbecuing, it's always lid down cooking. So by having this system set up, it just takes all the guesswork, not lifting it up and checking it, and it makes it way easier, especially if you're barbecuing when the weather's a bit cold, because if you're barbecuing September, October, and every time you lift the lid, it's going to drop by 20 or 30 degrees and then reheat it again. So it's going to slow down the cooking process. So by having this system, it takes all the guesswork out of it. So again, in the cookery school, we go into a lot more depth in how to use them, but that's just a very, very quick chat about it basically. So chicken is on. Also then what we're going to do is I've got some sweet potatoes. They don't need any salt or pepper or oil or anything. I've just wrapped these in tin foil like that. And I'm just going to cook them directly over the heat. So again, my outside burners are on, that's direct heat. Inside burners off, that's indirect heat. So chicken's in the center, sweet potatoes on the outside. They'll all roughly take about 45 minutes to an hour to cook. So again, I do have one that I made earlier on. This guy took 50 minutes to cook. So what you'll find there is that it's perfectly cooked. Again, with the temperature probe, you cook it to 74 degrees. And also with the temperature probe, you can use them as well in a domestic oven if needs be. The box comes off and you can put it beside your domestic oven. But again, like I work in a hotel and we do a lot of weddings, and I would still use a temperature probe for cooking large joints because it takes all the guesswork out of it. I'll also be using that in a while when I'm cooking the fish. So for the salad, so to speak, we're going to do it on a platter. So I have my chickens ready, and I have some sweet potatoes that I baked earlier on. So the first thing I want to do is that for the classic garnish for a Caesar salad, you'd have some crispy pancetta and you'd have some kind of croutons. So I've got some nice sourdough here, which I'm just going to toast over the direct heat. I've got some nice pancetta, which I'm just going to crisp up on the grill. This can be done at any stage when the chicken is cooking. I'm just going to toast these and crisp these up slightly. We're beside the airport here, so you can probably hear a helicopter going by. Sorry about that. While they're crisping up then, the rest of my ingredients are, I've got some mayonnaise and I've got some Parmesan. Also as well, I forgot to mention, on the chicken roaster, I put in some cloves of garlic in around the base of the roaster. So what those garlic cloves are going to do is they're going to smoke slightly with the smoke, and they're also going to cook and get nice and soft. These are some that I cooked with this chicken. So I'm just going to mash them into the mayonnaise. I'm also going to put some of the roasting juice through it. So you're going to kind of have a roasted garlic and chicken dressing, again, using natural flavors that would otherwise go in the bin, so to speak. Just want to keep an eye on my pancetta and my bread here. So again, these will crisp up and toast up quite fast. The reason I'm serving on a platter is because if I'm barbecuing myself at home, it's not a restaurant, you're not doing individual service. It's nice to serve things on board. So I'm going to serve it on this plank here. And again, this will be dinner for 4 on a large plank, which is quite nice. You can just drop it on the table. A lot of people go through a lot of hassle trying to plate things up. Food cools down a lot, especially when you're cooking outside. So with this, a large board or large platter, it looks smart, and you can serve a lot of people quite quickly. So I still don't want to burn my bread. That bread is toasted up nicely. I'm also going to show you how to carve the chicken and take it apart, which is a handy tip. Bacon is nearly crisp. So there's a little bit of smoke starting to come off the smoker box there. So a good thing when you're smoking is that smoke generally only sticks to fat. So that's why you'd have smoked cheeses, smoked chicken, you'd have smoked salmon, which is a fatty fish. If you have a lean meat that doesn't have that much fat content on it, like say a chicken breast with no skin, you won't get the same kick of smoke than you would if there was a skin on it, because smoke sticks to fat. And that's why I rubbed a lot of butter onto the chicken as well, because the smoke will just soak up and attach itself to the fat. So again, if you were smoking like a fillet steak, which is very little fat, you won't get a strong kick of smoke off it. So remember that smoking is best suited to fattier cuts of meat. So I'm just going to take off my bacon, keep that down. Also, as well with the spirit barbecue, you probably would get 4 chickens on this very easily. So you could do dinner for, so the chicken serves 4 people. You could do dinner for 16 quite easily on a barbecue this size. So for my dressing, so I've got some mayonnaise here. So I'm actually going to pour in some of the roasting juice. So what this will do is it'll thin out the mayonnaise to a nice soft consistency. And it's going to make it easier to dress my salad. So just mix in until you're happy with the consistency. So I'm going to get a little bit more in here. And trust me, this is amazing. You've got kind of a smoked chicken flavored liquid, which is going into the mayonnaise, which adds an extra depth of flavor that you wouldn't normally get if you were just to roast the chicken itself. The smoke makes a massive difference. And then I have my garlic. So my 2 cloves of garlic here. I'm just going to squash them because they're so soft. They just squash down very nicely. And then in here as well. And then just mix in the smoked roasted garlic. You could put loads of cloves of garlic in with it and make a smoked garlic puree, which you could have for loads of different things as well. So you just don't have to put in 2. I usually put in 2 or 4 cloves, but you can put in 25 into the bottom of that tray and make the most amazing dressing and have it. That's the dressing done. So I have dressing pan and ready. I'm going to break it up into chunks like that. Get that ready to rock and roll. My bread, I'm just going to cut up into croutons. So it's always easier to toast a whole slice of bread on it and then cut it up into croutons. If you try to toast croutons on it, they're going to fall through it. So that's why I've done it as a large slice. And again, we're just using a nice sourdough here. Chop them up. Also with the dressing, I've got some grated Parmesan cheese. So I'm going to drop that into the dressing as well, just to add again more flavor. I'm actually going to make the dressing a little bit thinner. So it's actually taking quite a lot of liquid. It's just easier to get it on onto the board if it's nice and thin. Excellent. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dress the plate or the board. I'm going to take my board here. Hopefully you can see that. We've got some baby gem lettuce here. So I'm just going to lay the baby gem on. Like so. The board like this. And then we're going to drizzle on the dressing. So we get our dressing, just drizzle on like that. If you want, you can mix the whole lot together in a bowl if you want to coat all the leaves. But this looks a bit nicer, I think. Because if you coat all the leaves and then you add the dressing, and then the weight of the chicken and the weight of the potatoes, it kind of squashes the salad leaves. So it's just a visual thing. It's not a taste thing. Just drop them on like that, okay? Next thing we're going to do is get our sweet potatoes. So these guys took an hour, but it'll depend on the potato itself. So they're probably the size of an apple, which took about an hour. You'll know when they're done when you squeeze the tin foil and it kind of feels like a soft banana. So I'm just going to take the sweet potatoes. I'm going to break them up just like that into chunks. And then I'm just going to drop them in around. So again, you've added a nice bit of color to the dish. I get a second one as well. So I've done 4 sweet potatoes. So this dish does serve 4 people. And just drop them on like that. That's enough there. Then we're going to take our croutons and our bacon, just drop that on. Okay. We're going to add a bit more dressing. over the top. And I'll show this up closer to the camera when it's all finished. So for the chicken, I'm going to carve the chicken now and show you how to take it apart. Upper space here. There we go. Right. So chicken. Anytime you roast a large joint, make sure you let it rest because it reabsorbs all its own juices naturally. If you carve into it too quickly, what will happen is it'll bleed a lot of its natural flavor, and you get a very dry jointed meat. So with the bird facing you, you're going to cut down the legs either side, and then just crack the legs back. This is a question I get asked a lot in the cookery school. When you break the bird open like this, you'll see the meat is slightly pink, and people assume that it's undercooked. It's not. The smoke will add a little bit of pinkness to the meat, and that gives the illusion. But by using the temperature probe, you know it's perfectly cooked. All right. So we take off the two legs. Then what I like to do is I just cut them into a drumstick and a thigh, and it should cut nice and easily if you go through the bone. So I'm just going to drop on a thigh there, a drumstick. Drop them on like that, and then with the breast then as well. So we go down the center, just to the left of the center, and it just peel away nicely the breast like that, and then the same on the other side. And then I'm just going to carve this. Leave that to the side here. And then just carve that at an angle. If everyone gets a bit of dark meat, they'll take like the thigh or a drumstick. And then I like to just give them like 3 slices of breast each. Just drop it on like this. And by carving it, so I've taken the breast off and I'm carving it across the grain of the meat, so everyone's getting a bit of skin as well. So like I said earlier on, most of the flavor will stick to the fat, which is the skin. So just drop that on. So you could have this as a main course or a nice starter. Depends how many people you're serving. And then I'm just going to sprinkle on some more Parmesan over the top like that. And that's the, can you see that? Mm-hmm. I need to go closer, is it all right? I'll come around. I'll just come up a bit closer to the camera. There. Yeah. So again, that would serve 4 people. That's very simple. Smoked chicken, some roast beef potatoes, and the rest then it's kind of just crisping up your bacon, your sourdough, and then you're stressing it nicely on the board like that. Ooh, let's see that here. That's the first dish. Is there any questions, Diana? No questions. If you want to type in questions far away. So I'm just going to clean down here. Just give me 2 seconds. And we'll jump on to the next dish. And these boards over so they're clean. So that's smoking on this guy here using a smoker box. So for my salmon, I'm going to smoke it on this one here. So same idea, we're going to use the wood chips. I've soaked them, but instead of putting them into a smoker box, they'll go directly onto the coals, which will heat them up and release the smoke. So what I've done with the barbecue is that I've set it up again for indirect heat. I've used my briquettes. I've got my 2 coal baskets, one to the left, one to the right. And then my center area here is going to be my cooking area. Okay. So the temperature that is good to go. I am going to move this over here. My salmon. So I have my salmon ready. So the recipe, you can do four supremes of salmon. I'm just going to do 2 today for the demonstration. So for the salmon, I brought it up to room temperature because again, it'll cook quicker and it'll cook more evenly. I've just salted it slightly. First thing I want to do before I cook the salmon is to make the flatbreads. This is a very, very simple recipe. It's Jimmy Oliver recipe. I'm not going to rob credit for it. he probably robbed it somewhere else. So ingredients, you have 3 ingredients. You have self-raising flour, natural yogurt, and baking powder. So it's equal quantities of self-raising flour to yogurt. So I've done 200 self-raising flour, 200 natural yogurt, and then there's half a teaspoon of baking powder. And you just mix it with a fork until it comes together in a soft dough like this. It doesn't need to prove or rise or anything like that. You just mix it up. I've put some chopped dill through it just to add a bit more color. And you could put some tarragon through it, some lemon zest, some basil. You could serve this with chicken, maybe put some smoked paprika through it and some rosemary. But again, the base recipe is very, very simple. It's equal quantities of self-raising flour to yogurt with a bit of baking powder. And then just add in anything you want to jazz it up. So we have a rolling pin here. All right, use that. And then just a little bit of flour on the board. So what I want to do is I want to get the flatbreads ready first before I start smoking the fish. I'm going to cook them on the grill on this, okay? So you just take kind of a golf ball size piece. Okay. And then we're just going to roll them out like you would a pizza. So I'm doing these nice and small because they're kind of for a starter. For me, I would probably do this dish as a starter, and then the chicken dish then would be a main course. So if you have one barbecue at home, which most people have, you might do your flatbreads, smoke your salmon, start plating that dish up, and then get your chicken on, which will be ready then in the hour. So you'll actually be able to do a 2-course meal on the one barbecue using smoke. There will be loads of heat in the charcoal for that amount of cooking. And with your gas, then it's unlimited. You can just keep the gas going. So that's the flatbread. And then I'm just going to give it 3 little slashes in the center. That helps it puff up a little bit. It helps it crisp up a little bit. And also it looks nicer presentation. Okay. I'm just going to show you that again. You just take a small piece like that. Okay. Tiny bit of flour. Just enough flour so it's not sticking. Don't add too much flour to it. Roll it out. And then just 3 little slashes like that. Okay, that's it. Very, very simple. That's going to go onto the direct heat, so directly over the coals. I'm going to do 2 of them there. And they'll take about 1.5 minutes on either side. And that's the flatbread done. This recipe here, you probably get 6 out of that, which is the 200-gram recipe, or 4 big ones. It's completely up to yourself. And again, in the cookery school, I always say to people that, the flatbreads would also work with the chicken dish. You could do a nice chicken flatbread. So you'll take one element of a dish. It doesn't necessarily have to be served with that dish. It can be adapted to anything. You could do the hot smoked salmon Caesar salad. So you could do smoked salmon and put it on top of the Caesar salad. So again, in recipe books, sometimes people become very stuck. It's like, oh, the flatbread has to be served with salmon. No, it doesn't. You can do anything you want with it. Question, thank God.
Will the bread not stick to the barbecue?
The bread will stick to the barbecue if the barbecue isn't hot enough. So if you, with the barbecues, so with all the charcoal barbecues, they're stainless steel grates. And these guys here are cast iron. The cast iron would be way better in relation to non-stick than these. But if the temperature is correct and it's nice and hot, it shouldn't stick. And obviously, if you keep your barbecue cleaned regularly, you should be okay. And again, this recipe will work in a domestic frying pan at home, but you won't have the kind of charred flavor as you would on the barbecue. All right. So, this temperature, I'm at 200 degrees. Yeah. So they're not sticking. You can see they're lifting quite easily. And I'm getting these nice charred marks on the bread. Okay. So I can crisscross the charred mark if I want. And then you can charge extra money in the restaurant. So lid back down. And again, like that dropped there by about 20 to 30 degrees. So keep the lid down as much as you can. And it just keeps the heat going in the barbecue. So I'll flip these over now. So for another minute and I will put my salmon on. Leave that there. So for the salmon, I'll use the temperature probe as well for the salmon. So this guy is connected to the spirit, but you can also buy an individual one that sits on the side here. I'm just going to use that lead. So with the salmon, 70 or 55 degrees is the perfect temperature to cook salmon to. Most people generally overcook salmon, and when you overcook salmon, it tastes a bit tough. So by using the temperature probe again, it's taking all the guesswork out of the cooking, which makes life a lot easier. So these flatbreads should be ready. Yep, they're done. Take off my flatbreads. So I'm going to get my salmon. I'm going to throw it on. Now with this barbecue here, I don't know if you can see in the camera, there's two little flaps on either side which lift up. The benefit of them is that it makes you be able to access the coals very, very easily. So if you want to add extra coals to create more heat in the barbecue, or if you want to add in the wood chips, it makes life a lot easier. So I'm just going to take my wood chips here. Again, these are apple wood chips, soaked. Just drop them in, half a handful either side. Lid back down. And in about, I'd say 60 seconds, you'll probably see smoke start to rise out of this, okay? And again, like I said earlier on, it's a fatty piece of fish. And the smoke sticks to the fat, okay? Temperature probe, I will stick it in there. So because that's raw chicken, I'm just going to sterilize the top of this in the flame. So I'll give that about 60 seconds and I'll just sterilize the top of it. Just be cautious of that. And generally in relation to barbecuing, you always hear about food poisoning. This is just me waffling on while waiting for this guy to start smoking. But in relation to food poisoning, generally what happens is that people would have like the tongs for cooking. So they turn their raw chicken. The tongs are sitting to the side, just flies landing in and all that kind of stuff. And then it's the same tongs that you're using for serving the cooked chicken, which is what we call cross-contamination. So be very cautious of that in relation to barbecuing. I would generally get everything on with the tongs. When everything's kind of starting to color up nicely, I would wash the tongs before serving, just to avoid anyone getting sick, okay? Especially when you're out in the sunshine, bacteria loves to grow in the heat. It's just a little tip for you. So I'm just gonna take this guy out here. This I'm going to stick into my salmon. You can see the smoke is starting to kick off there. Put into my salmon. Throw down the smoke there. Yeah. So this will probably take about, I'd say, 4 or 5 minutes for the salmon to cook. Again, I'll check my phone in a second to make sure that it's tipping along nicely. But again, the apps on the phone, like I'm a chef for years, whatever, these do make life a lot easier, especially if you're inside the house, because there's a certain, they work within, it depends on the Wi-Fi connection, the Bluetooth connection, but it does make life a lot easier. So the temperature of that now at the moment is at 32 degrees. So that'll start beeping when it's ready. For the rest of my garnish then with this, so I've got my nice flatbread, so I'm just going to drop that there. I've got some cucumber, which I've washed. So we're going to do some pickled cucumber. So I've got equal quantities of rice wine vinegar and icing sugar, which makes kind of a sweet and sour pickled liquid. I've got a speed peeler, which is like a vegetable peeler. And I'm going to peel large strips like that. Like this, okay? I'm going to drop them into the liquid. Now, the reason I use icing sugar is because it just dissolves in the vinegar very, very quickly. If you use caster sugar, it's the same quantities, but you have to boil the caster sugar with the vinegar to break down the granules. Then you have to let the liquid cool down. Otherwise, it'll if there's hot liquid going into the cucumber, what it's going to do is it's going to turn the cucumber brown. So we're going to drop these in here. So you get these really nice kind of restaurant strips. So I'm just going to toss it in the pickle liquid like that. And then leave it rest for a few minutes. Okay. Our dressing then, we've got some creme fraiche. We're going to put in some lemon juice. We'll drop in some lemon juice just to thin it out slightly. And we've got some capers as well. You can chop the capers. I like to put them through a hole, to be honest with you. It's completely up to yourself. Just chop a few more of these, or some more lemon juice. So again, nice drop of consistency. My capers, they'll thin the sauce as well naturally a little bit, so a tablespoon of capers in there. If you are smoking outside, just make sure that your clothesline is downwind, because everything will stink to smoke.
Good question here.
Yeah.
Any tips on smoking briskets in a charcoal barbecue? Do you recommend wrapping the brisket, and if so, at what temp and for what time? And with foil or with paper?
So for smoking a brisket, what you'll do, your ideal temperature is 90 degrees, okay, for a long, slow smoke like that. So with this barbecue, with a lot of the charcoal barbecues, you get what's called a heat diffuser. So you have the coals underneath, then there's a plate that goes on top, which stops direct heat hitting the brisket. Also, sometimes you'll see as well, you'll have a water bath in with the coals. What happens is that water can only boil at 100 degrees, so it can't get hotter than that. So the water, when the coals heat up, the water, you just have the water just off boiling point. So you get this temperature of about 90 to 95 degrees, plus you get moisture, which is keeping the meat nice and moist. What you would do then is you would smoke the brisket to get what's called a bark on it. For the first, I'd say an hour, 2 hours, a very low smoke, and you get this dark smoke, which will all stick to the outside of the meat. After that, then you will wet some baking parchment, wrap your smoked brisket in that, and sit it back on the heat until, for another, I'd say another 5 to 6 hours, depending on thickness and width, until you get the tenderness then. So step one is add smoke. Step two then is getting the tenderness through slow cooking. In relation to cooking times, it depends on the thickness, the size. It's a very hard question to answer. But with Weber, with the Weber Connect and with the iGrill and using your phone, if you are doing a smoked brisket, it'll go through all the steps and tell you exactly how to do it. But definitely apply smoke first, then a slow cook wrapped to keep all the moisture in. Hope that answers the question.
So not covered and then covered.
Yeah, uncovered, smoke it. And the smoke is stuck to it, you're getting the flavor, then cover it. Otherwise, it'll eventually dehydrate and it will burn if it's in there for 6 or 7 hours uncovered. 90 degrees, yeah. So it's a slow smoke. These are kind of more quick smoke, whereas the American style barbecue is a slow smoke, ending from, say, 6 to 12 hours. Also, as well, like there's loads of different techniques in relation to how you set up your coals. There's a technique called snaking, where you put all your coals around in a circle, but the circles get smaller. And what you would do then is you would light the first 4 or 5 coals at the tail of the snake, so to speak. They'll burn out, they'll give you a temperature of about 90 degrees. And as they're burning out, they'll begin to light the rest. And you could do a long, slow smoke. With this guy here, you could do that technique, or else you can use the coal baskets. But to reduce the temperature, then you would adjust your vents so they're slightly open. So what you would do then is you would reduce the oxygen supply by slightly closing the top and bottom vents until you see a temperature of 90 degrees. That's where it's a bit more finicky. Then you would just leave it, because you've reduced the oxygen supply. The flame isn't kicking up, so you've got a nice low smoke. That's a completely different class. I hope that answers your question. So I just want to check the temperature on the salmon. So like there is, so I'm going to go to camera there 1 second. Like obviously, this system here is an integrated system. It's the way Weber are going. You could also have like a regular temperature probe like this guy here, which you can just stick into the meat. or fish, and it'll give you an instant reading. So we're at 50, we're at 46 now, so we're nearly cooked. So again, it's not necessary, but it does take a lot of the guesswork out of it, just having a temperature gauge in relation to knowing what the core temperature of the meat is. Just be very, very careful when you're using these, because I do sometimes see people put this into the meat and then out the other side. And this guy here is reading the barbecue temperature. And then all of a sudden, then you're, you know, the thing is telling you that your chicken's at 200 degrees after 5 minutes. You know it's not right. Just be conscious of that. But it does take a lot of the guesswork out of it, and it makes life a lot easier. So I would highly recommend it. So I've got my dressing, and I've got my pickled cucumber. So I'm just going to start laying my pickled cucumber around the plate like this. Just around the edge like that. And I'll be taking my salmon directly off and putting it on top of the flatbread. I've got some of the dressing. So I'm just going to dribble some of the dressing around. So, got some chives here as well, which I'm going to chop. I don't like to chop them finely. I kind of chop them into little mini matchsticks. You can chop them finely if you want. I'm just going to drop them on, just to add a bit of an oniony bite. If you didn't have these, some spring onions or some scallions would be nice. Or if you had some pickled onions would be lovely on this as well. So the reason, like the capers are quite sour, the lemon juice is quite sour, which is very, very important, especially when you serve it with salmon. Salmon is extremely fatty, so you always need a bit of acidity to cut through the fatness. And that's why I've pickled the cucumbers as well, so that when you have the whole lot together, it actually tastes quite nice. Got some dill here as well. So I'm just going to tear on some dill. It's going to rain any minute, it's it. I'll just drop it on. Now I'm just going to check my salmon again. So I'm just going to use this guy here. Perfectly cooked, I can tell straight away by looking at it. Yeah, 55, and my phone is actually beeping as well. My salmon is ready. A good telltale sign with the salmon is that you see a kind of a white milk starting to come out of it. You just know it's perfectly cooked at that stage, okay? So I'll let that rest for a second. Also as well, what I did at the start was I just rubbed a bit of butter onto the tray. So these are Weber roasting trays for the barbecue. Fish is extremely delicate. And certain vegetables, like say asparagus, things like that, are very, very delicate. So when I'm cooking on the barbecue, I use a tray because it's easy to move the fish or the vegetables without it breaking up. If I was to put that directly onto the coals, there's a possibility of it sticking if my temperature's not right. But this makes life a lot easier. Okay. So I'm just going to take my salmon. How are we doing on time? Okay. Perfect. So I'm just going to lift it off. It's come off perfectly, okay? And then I'm just going to drop it on top of the flatbread like that. I'm going to add some more herbs to the top. I'm going to put some more capers on, just for a contrast in color. And then a little bit of the sauce on top of that. And then maybe another little bit of pickled cucumber on top. Just on top like that. Actually, I don't like it. Here we go. So I'll just show you that closely. See? So again, it's a nicely presented dish. Everything was done from scratch. The flatbread dough I had just mixed from 4 or 5 minutes beforehand because it's not very exciting to watch that. But again, you would cook your flatbreads on the barbecue, smoke your salmon, You could serve that up while you're plating it up, get the chicken on, you could add more wood chips, start smoking your chicken, get your sweet potatoes on. And again, if you're using the temperature probe or the iGrill or the iConnect, you don't have to worry about your chicken. You just have it all plugged in, it's ready to rock and roll. And it takes all the guesswork out of it. So I'm just going to clean down here 1 sec. If you have any questions, guys, please type them in. Even if it's not barbecue related. If it's a general cooking question, there's no hassle whatsoever. So I'm just going to clean this down here. Can you pass me over the chicken thing there, please? Excellent. Do you see the two of them? Yeah. Cool. So guys, there are the two dishes that the recipes you'll have cover. So fair enough, before we started, I had the chicken on and sweet potatoes on, but the rest I kind of prepared in front of you. Nothing was kind of made from start to finish. It was all done and dusted. Any questions popped in there? Yes.
Any tips on getting crispy skin on chicken wings on the barbecue? I've heard baking powder is a rub my cup. We're using a vortex.
So if you want, what I do to get crispy chicken wings is that I poach chicken wings in chicken stock first. So I would get like a pot of water, chicken bouillon, and I would gently poach the chicken wings until they're 100% cooked. I'll then remove them from the water and just let them air dry for like 20 minutes. And then I'll put them into the fridge uncovered. Before I cook them, then what I do is I smoke paprika and corn flour. I toss them all in smoked paprika and corn flour, and then a little bit of oil. And then the corn flour dries out the skin even more. Smoked paprika was going to help them add a bit of color, and then the oil will help crisp them up. And then on a tray, like I cook the salmon, I will lay a flat layer of the chicken wings, and then just drop them on direct heat onto a piping hot barbecue. What you'll find then is that you're going to get a nice crispy color on the side that's exposed. And then once you get that, you can kind of start to shake them a little bit. In relation to getting them very, very crisp on a barbecue, cooking them from raw, it is tricky. It is tricky because there'll be a natural amount of moisture in the chicken it'll start to release. So for the chicken wings, that's kind of, it's a chef tip, but poach them the day before, leave them in the fridge the night before. Then that day, then you have cooked chicken wings. You're just reheating them and crisping them up on the barbecue. So that's how I do it. It is very hard to do it from scratch. Cool. More questions?
Is there anything that's not really suitable to be done on the barbecue?
Oh, I presume there is, yeah. Any protein, any meat or fish is going to be okay. So like, I would be cautious of very, very like duck breasts is a tricky one to cook because the fat, such a high fat content, is going to cause a lot of flames. So something like a duck breast, I'd be very, very cautious of. In relation to Weber, and like why I work with Weber is that you can get so many different attachments for the barbecue. So you can get like a flat plate which catches all the fat. So depending on what you're going to cook, I'd always be conscious of what's the mess it's going to cause. Is this going to do justice to the meat or fish? So when you're cooking with barbecues, obviously it's kind of lovely charred color, smoky effects what you're getting. I would just stay away from very, very high, like pork belly. I wouldn't put that directly onto a coal. I'd have it on a tray and maybe slow smoke it, but the tray is catching all the fat. It's just, I have seen people barbecuing high fat, fatty pieces of meat. And instead of getting a bit of smoke, what they're getting is flames, the fat is going down. Like if the sausage bursts, you'll see, you get this massive red flame and you're gonna actually start burning the food instead of cooking it. So just watch out for fatty meat, but you can cook anything. You can cook anything on a barbecue.
Now, how do you set up the charcoal for cooking pizza on the pizza stone? Do you place the stone directly over the coals or indirectly?
What I do for the pizza stone personally is that I go directly over the coals, but I also set up some coals indirectly, so to speak. So what I would do is that I would have my coal basket. I do both ways, to be honest with you. I put the coals directly underneath the pizza, and then I set up some extra coals at the back, another amount of coals. So you kind of have 3 spots of heat. So the coals underneath are going to heat up the pizza stone, which gives you a nice crisp base. And then the coals at the back will send a bit of heat up and following the dome of the barbecue, which is going to help the top of the pizza kind of brown up nicely. Because if you don't have a heat source coming over the top, like if you go into a classic Italian restaurant where you see a pizza oven, it's always a hot stone, but you'll always see the flame going over the grill of the pizza oven. But to simulate that, that's what I do personally. Hope that answers your question.
What's your personal favorite for impact?
For impact?
Yeah.
My favorite dish is probably, I do smoked seafood chowder. It's absolutely amazing. So I have a thing called a Dutch oven, which is a cast iron oven which sits into the Weber barbecue. So I'd make a chowder base. So I'd saute off some onions, celery, potatoes, fish stock. I make kind of like a soup. I blitz it up. Then on the outside of the grill, I pan fry some scallops, some prawns, some lobsters. That's really luxurious. I drop them into the soup in the middle of the Dutch oven just to finish them off. And for the last 3 or 4 minutes of cooking, I put in a splash of cream, and then I add wood chips, and then that cream catches all the smoke. So you kind of get a smoked, very expensive smoked seafood chowder. Now your timing with it has to be perfect, but it's probably my favorite thing to cook on the barbecue. I know it sounds simple, chowder, but it's a fancy chowder. So that's kind of one of the top ones. Or else it would be a rotisserie chicken. I'm not trying to sell you stuff. They all come with rotisserie units, and if you rotate a chicken, it's self-basting for the whole cooking process, and you just get amazing chicken as well. So like a rotisserie chicken or a smoked seafood chowder would be my top 2 showstoppers. Any other questions?
We can leave for a minute there.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
So guys, that's everything. So I'm at the pavilion in Ballygarvan. We have a Weber store here. And also my cookery school is Kinsale Gourmet Academy, and we're hoping to reopen in July for barbecue classes outdoors. So keep an eye on us on social media. Okay, so cheers. Thanks very much. If there's any questions, far away.
David, thanks for that. We really appreciate it. On behalf of the committee, I'd just like to thank David. The events over the last 2 weeks have been absolutely fantastic. I know I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else who's viewed the events has learned as well. We have a couple of events coming up for the committee. We have our AGM next week on the 25th, and we have our breakfast briefing with Owen McGettigan on the 27th. So we'd be delighted if you could join us for those events. So just again, David, on behalf of the committee, just to thank you for the events over the last couple of weeks.
You're welcome.
I'm sure people, hopefully once you're back up and running Kinsale in better times than COVID, we'll be able to come and visit you for an in-person course.
Brilliant.
Excellent. So thank you, everyone.
No problem. Take it easy, guys. Thank you very much.